Hanratty back to pass. Complete at the 20, the flyer, touchdown, Notre Dame.
I feel right now that I'm the number one quarterback for Steelers.
Hanratty down the center to Seymour, complete touchdown.
Welcome to Hanratty's Huddle, sports talk with the College Football Hall of Famer, Terry Hanratty.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hanratty's Huddle. I'm Rob Adams with Dave Toromio and, of course, Terry Hanratty. And, gentlemen, we have a guest today and a big show lined up. Let's dive in. How are you guys?
Very good, Rob. Very good.
Good, Rob.
And let me introduce my good friend here, Tom Lemming, who is the guru for high school football. I mean, what Tom does, I'm not even going to try to explain it.
Yeah.
I want Tom to tell us what his annual, now he's been doing this since the late 70s.
Yeah.
Every year, and I want him to explain what he does on an annual basis, because it really is truly incredible.
Well, before he answers the question, I just want to say for any of our listeners, if you don't know who Tom Lemming is, then you really don't know anything about high school or college football. But Tom is the guru, and Tom, welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure. It's I enjoy doing it, and I have known Terry for a while. Terry has come on as a guest on my show in the past. One time we did a show with him and Jimmy Ray talking about the game of the century from 1966. I thought it was one of our better shows.
Yeah, that was Jimmy. Jimmy's a good guy. He was offensive coordinator for a long time in the NFL. So he did quite well.
New York Jets.
Yeah. But give us an outline, Tom, what you do on an annual basis, because I find it just phenomenal that one could actually do it. Because I'm a driver. I'm not afraid to fly. I like to fly. But if I can drive from A to B, I will do that in a heartbeat. Because I don't
I'm
want
like
to
you.
go to the airports and do this and that late. But when I go to Notre Dame from Connecticut, it's a 10-hour drive, so I just get in the car and go. But
I'm just like you, Terry, and what I do, I've been doing this since '78 and driving around the country. Back the first 20 years or so, I used to just fly. I had 57 flights a year going from one end. It became very stressful and tension-filled because of delays and penalties. And then you get off the airport, you got to get your luggage, got to go to the rental car bus, take it over to rental. Now I just find driving is much more relaxing. I listen to books on tape and make my calls. I do a lot of podcasts while I drive, and it works out a lot better for me. And I drive all 48 states, the mainland states, and I went to Alaska one time, but there's no football players up there.
Yeah.
But CBS wanted me to hit all 50 states one year, and I go to Hawaii every third year or so. But every year I drive the 48 states, and I love it because I combine football with history and with travel. And like on this past trip, I just did 11,000 miles in 24 days, everything west of the Mississippi, up and down Texas twice and California twice, but all the way up to Seattle and all the way down to El Paso and places like that. And I did a lot of history. I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas, where they had the very first spring training baseball game. The Chicago White Stockings, which are now the Cubs, in 1886. And then Babe Ruth was there in 1918, where he hit the longest home run in the history of baseball, 573 feet. They have where home plate is, and it got hit into an alligator farm, which is still there from 1918. And they got a little plaque where the ball landed 573 feet from home plate. I love history like that. And I visited Little Bighorn out in Montana on this trip. So I combine both, and I really enjoy it.
well, how do you find, because you're going after high school football players. So you have to have all these high schools marked out. Okay, I'm going to stop at such and such a high school. I'm going to stop it because what you do is to tell the people, you go and you interview these kids and you take pictures, then you put them in your book. All the college coaches buy your book, and it's a great success. But how do you set up all these meetings?
You know what I do? I've had, it's a collective opinion now. I've been doing it now for 47 years. So I could talk to high school coaches, sports writers, college coaches, even NFL coaches, because throughout the 80s and 90s, everyone came to my house to watch film. Guys like John Gruden or Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer said he came as a GA in 88. And Mac Brown said he came in 79 as an assistant coach at Iowa State. And matter of fact, he coached Vinny Serrato back then at Iowa State back in 79. So, yeah, there's a lot of guys that I've known. So I talk to them, and they call me all year and say, you got to look at this guy, got to look at that guy. So normally I don't miss too many. The ones I do miss are guys that are still developing and haven't made a name for themselves as of yet. But for the most part, I'll usually hit everybody. And now it's a lot of time big groups. I had one at UCLA a couple of weeks ago, and it was 85 players that came. So I didn't have to go to 85 high schools. I did go to the premier schools like Mater Dei and St. John Bosco, school Santa Margarita. But for the most part, I had all the other guys meet in one spot, and it helps me save a lot of time. And I did the same at Bellevue High School in Seattle and different states. I have big groups together. But for the great players, I try to go individually to the schools, at least my top 300. So I have more time to sit down with the player and the coach.
Tom, it's been many years since I've thumbed through the book because I used to work for the National Football Foundation College Hall of Fame and in college athletics. But has the book morphed into an online, or do you still do the actual book?
I do both. I do, But you're right. A lot of the young people would rather have online stuff, but a lot of the older people like the hard copy. It's 240 pages.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. But everything else, I do a regular magazine, and then I do an underclass magazine, and then a couple issues in January and March, and some newsletters. But everything else is online, except the big book in the summertime still comes out online and also hard copy.
Very nice.
Tom, it fascinates me. What do you look for when you go to see these players?
That's a good question because a lot of people, there's a lot of internet people now that just call kids on the phone once their own school that they follow tells them, we like this guy, we like this guy. And that's good. I'd like to do Gil Brandt, who's the famous scout, passed away a couple years ago from the Cowboys. Mike Godfrey was my partner on ESPN back in the late 80s through 90s, and he used to do a charity thing called La Arch for his daughter who was learning mentally challenged. So he was Tim Brando and Paul Feinbaum and Kenny Stabler, myself, and Gil were the speakers for all those years. And I used to sit next to Gil, and he always told me that he did an 8-star thing, and he started guys off. I started the star system, which kids like now. 8 stars I felt was too many, so I made it down to 5 stars because of hotels. And I do that. I rank them according to what I see. Obviously you got to be the same size and speed that fits that position. But what I like to do is when I see a guy in person to sit down and ask him how important football is. Is it a means to an end, or do you really love it? What are your hobbies when you're not playing football? And I love when a guy says, my hobby is lifting weights and watching more football film. That means these guys have the heart. Once they get against guys as big, as strong as they are, they got the heart to make it to that next level and maybe even to the NFL someday. So I do like to see the guys and look them in the eye and talk to them. Plus, when you see them in person, you'll see that they're the size that they say they are, because almost everyone exaggerates their height. and a lot of times their weight also. If you say you're 6'3", almost always they're 6'1 and a half. So you got to, when you see them in person, you could tell if they're wearing heels in their shoes or something to make them a little bit taller, but that helps. And then I do like to talk to them in person and also talk to the coach when the player's not there to see what kind of character he has, because that's a big thing for a lot of schools. Terry went to Notre Dame. That's a school that really does look at character. A lot of the private schools, more so than everyone else, I do think look more at character and academics than the other schools do.
They look at character, but they still let Terry in. What's wrong with this picture?
I snuck under the wire. Tom, tell me, what do you think the biggest jump is from high school to Division I or Division I to the NFL?
I think a couple of things. The shock of playing in front of sometimes 100,000 people can really shock a lot of these kids, and they get stage fright. But also, I think the size of the players. If you're a 6'5", 250-pound defensive end in high school, you dominate, or you should be, or else you wouldn't be going to Power 4 school. But then you go up against a guy bigger than you when you're in college, and I think the shock of playing against guys as talented and as big as you are can be a problem for a lot of kids. That's why you see so many transfers now. They can come in as a freshman, and they're treated by their parents and their coach many times as if they're God's gift. Then they get to college and they realize they're not the only great player around, and they don't want to fight for a job. They just want to transfer. I've seen a lot of guys transfer 3, 4, 5 schools because they don't want to fight for a job. They want to be handed a job. And I think the shock of seeing people as talented as they are is probably the biggest thing. I mean, besides obviously working a little bit harder on academics and everything else, but with football-wise, I do think it's that shock of seeing other great athletes.
Tom, a lot of the conversations we've had the past year or so has been around NIL and the transfer portal and all that stuff. And maybe nobody knows better than you, being on the ground and where you are, all these schools. What are you seeing, and what are your thoughts about all this, and how does it affect this recruiting process?
Immensely now. It's I would have to say 75% of the players I've been running into, at least the top 300, definitely the top 50, all worry about NIL more than academics or anything. Their parents will give you we want to make. There was a great player in Chicago 2 years ago, and he said his mom told me two things: distance from home and academics. Then he chose the school farthest away, and a school that hardly ever graduates their players because they gave him a lot of money for NIL. And you see what happens. One ball player last year, another defensive lineman in Chicago, committed to Auburn, switched to Michigan with getting a lot more money. And then obviously the quarterback who was committed to LSU for a year and a half, Bryce Underwood, switched to Michigan because it was more money. And I think of the top 100, half of them switch schools after committing to one school. And that seems to be the rule now rather than the exception if you're a top 100 player. Find a school you could land early, and that means then you've got a place. That school's giving me such and such money. Now I'll have my people, which a lot of times are 7-on-7 coaches or an uncle that never was in the family until he found out the kid's a great athlete and pops right in. And they start dealing with other schools and saying, well, he's committed here, but if you give him this, he's going to go there. That happens a lot of times now the last couple of years. And so academics are out the window for a good part of the top 300 players, I think. And more important now is how much money they're getting, not realizing that money is going to go quick through taxes and your agent that's taking 25% instead of 3% like the NFL agents do. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you don't have that much money and you have no education and you've blown the biggest chance of your life. So I think kids that have parents that are really involved with the academics, obviously NIL plays a part in it, but you got to make sure the academics play an even bigger part. And if you do that, you're always going to be on safe ground, no matter how your college career either takes off or fizzles.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there when you said that the money is going to go because half is going to Uncle Sam right away, and the agent's getting 25%. I didn't realize it was that high. That's crazy money.
Well, it's a lot of them, Terry. A lot of those agents are, especially kids that don't really have a parent that knows what he's doing, and they rely on coaches that have been getting them to switch high schools. Some kids go to 3 or 4 different high schools now because they got coaches that aren't their high school coaches, but maybe 7-on-7 coaches or people that are directing them. And maybe they have a mother that doesn't know much about football. So all of a sudden these guys get involved and they'll start taking more than what normal agents take. And that's a shame, but it's because of the ignorance of the recruiting process and because there are no rules in NIL right now. NCAA has let everything just go. It's the Wild West. There's no rules. There always had been cheating onto the table. I've been doing this 47 years. I didn't have my hand in the sand. A lot of these schools were doing cheating anyway. So now they can cheat below the table and above the table. They can do as much as they want now.
Yeah.
How do we get it under control? How does the NCAA kind of get this, get it into some kind of organization?
I think they've had problems with Congress. Congress is letting these kids have, free-handed everything, and I think there has to be some rules, but maybe it has to come down by the government. The NCAA doesn't seem willing to do it because every time they say something, I think the government comes back and slaps them in the face. So I do think that maybe once it keeps getting, you're hearing stories like the Tennessee quarterback who left Nico, who's a good kid, but he's being directed in the wrong way. He was already given a lot of money. Then he wanted more money, even though he had a good but not great year for Tennessee. So UCLA got him, but I'd be anxious to find out if UCLA gave him more money. That's not a school with a ton of money. So I would have to see. Maybe he made a mistake, and now he's probably getting about the same that Tennessee gave him.
I think he's getting less. I think he's getting $1 million or 1.5. Yeah, I think he definitely screwed himself there.
And his brother left Arkansas, and I think there's talk that maybe Arkansas and Tennessee will sue him and his group because of breach of contract. So that's interesting. If you get more problems like that, then I think maybe the government and maybe the NCAA will kind of say it's got to stop now. It's getting crazy because it is. Some schools don't really have a chance. And now with the new rules of 105 scholarships, that means there's no more walk-ons. And that means that you're given 105 and that's it. And I know the judge, she's trying to grandfathering, which I think is a good idea. Kids that have been walk-ons the last couple of years now are being cut out of the program. I mean, they've worked really hard without a scholarship, and all of a sudden they're throwing them out of the programs because of the rules now. And I think the athletic directors have to come together and grandfather at least the freshmen, sophomore, and juniors from last year in, and then let it fade after 3 years.
Yeah. Tom, has anybody asked you? I know if you were recruiting my kid, or if you were working with my kid, I would ask you, because you have all the contacts and you have the knowledge. Can you represent my kid? Can you, or have you ever thought about transitioning to the agent side?
No, I never have. I've never taken a penny from a kid. Even when they ask for free magazines, I send them free ones all the time. It's the fans and the colleges that get my magazine, and I don't really need. And I wouldn't do. I would give advice like I do now on the radio and on the podcast, but I wouldn't take money from anybody doing that. I'm not qualified. I would say if you wanted to be an agent, it's good to be a lawyer. Know the rules. There's so many rules now. I'm not a lawyer, and I think, but though sometimes the lawyers are not real honest either. So people, it's really tough to find an honest guy that's going to take 3% from the player and really help the player out. A lot of times it's all everyone for themselves when it comes to college football nowadays.
Yeah.
I had a former athletic director tell me that UCLA is basically out of money.
Yeah.
That they're not going to be able to pay Nico maybe $1 million was my call, and they're going to probably have to have some, because if you think about it, the Pac-10, when they joined the teams that joined the Big Ten, they're not getting money from the Big Ten for another several years. I didn't realize
travel budget's much higher.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. But see, that's the other thing about these conferences. What's your thought on I really think that the non-revenue sports should stay in their own location. Mm-hmm. It's okay to travel football when you're going 5 games a year, going to UCLA, going to Maryland, or going to Indiana or wherever. But when you're sending your volleyball team from Southern California to Maryland, that costs a bloody fortune, and that's just money coming right out of the pot, and it doesn't have to be that way.
That's good. I never really thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. And because they can't pay for themselves. Only football and basketball normally are money makers. I think some programs in baseball can make a few bucks, but for the most part, Terry, you went to Notre Dame. Notre Dame the football pays for most of the other programs.
Everybody.
At Notre Dame, and they're paying for that travel. But a school like Notre Dame can afford it, but the majority of the schools cannot afford it. And I think you're right. I think the cost is really hurting schools like UCLA, Oregon State, or Washington State. USC has a lot of money. Oregon's got a ton of Nike money. But there aren't that many when you're talking about the West Coast, and they've got to come to the Big Ten, at least the 4 schools do. And I think that's got to be a problem for everyone but Oregon and USC.
I think USC really blew the whole environment for everybody. There was no need, they didn't have a TV contract, so they panicked. So they immediately jumped to the Big Ten. If they had just stayed there and negotiated, and hire somebody to negotiate a TV contract for them, then everything would have been a lot better. But there's no way in hell that they should be in the Big Ten. I mean, this is absolutely insanity now.
It's all about greed. And I was with John Gruden a year or two ago, and we were having lunch, and he was telling me, which was true. He said, if the NCAA had gotten out in front of everything, paid the kids 10 years ago, not the astronomical sums they're making now, but paid them, then there wouldn't have been this problem. But the greed of the major colleges is, to me, screwing up college football. And that's why you're going to wind up with probably just 2 or 3 conferences. There's Power 4 now, so 4. And a lot of the other schools are scrambling just to keep their programs going. And I think that's a shame, because it was great when football was all over the country and you could see a game no matter what conference and no matter what town you're in. Nowadays, it's people are forgetting about the smaller schools, and they're just zooming in on the power schools, probably the top 50 schools. And that's about it, instead of the top 200 schools.
Tom, what roadblocks do you face in what you do? Does a school say you can't come here or you can't come see a kid? Does that ever happen?
No, I don't have any roadblocks at all. Schools can't tell me anything, because I'm not really part of the schools. I could have the players meet. And what's funny was, since I've been doing this so long, Al Groh was the head coach of the New York Jets. and he left the Jets to become head coach of his alma mater, Virginia. Al calls me in 2001. And he says, "Hey, how come you never did a front cover picture of Virginia? What's the matter? You don't like us or this and that?" I didn't know anything about it. So I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So I go out there. I flew to Richmond that year, and then I drive. At the airport, he's got the Richmond newspaper, Dispatch, and the Charlottesville paper meeting me there, and I'm thinking this could be a problem because, I used to do it under the radar a little bit. I get there, and he's got buses. He's got a GA taking me around for location shots like it's a movie, and I just bring my couple of cameras, and then we go. Then he's got all, and we had the top 35 players in Virginia meet there. They come and I told him just game jersey and game pants. He's got them with shoulder pads, which is tough to fit 50 guys in a picture when they're wearing pads. And he has it location in front of their Thomas Jefferson's the big building, the rotunda. And then we go back and he's got chefs cutting up prime rib for the kids and all this stuff. And I'm thinking this isn't going to be good. Yeah. So I get a call the next day. Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech and Phil Fulmer at Tennessee. Friends of mine, they called the NCAA, say this is unfair. He doesn't do it at our school. He does it at Virginia. And so the next year they had a Tom Lemming rule, which meant if I do something on a campus, the college coaches cannot see the players. Like I did one at UCLA a couple weeks ago. Kids had to leave. They couldn't talk to the coaches. And that's the rule now. But believe it or not, the next year, Frank Beamer says, won't you do it at Virginia Tech? There's a German club right across the street from the stadium that's not part of the school. It's private property. We did it right there across from there. And then Phil Fulmer says, do it by our, whenever they had they got a dome there that I think we used to be part of a State's Fair or something. I did it there. The kids walked right down the street to Tennessee. There's always ways around these rules. And now I could do it on a campus, but I used to do it where the college coaches, after I finished, they would go see the college coaches. Now, if I finish, they got to, some schools maybe drive a block out of the campus and come right back and see the coaches. Kind of a ridiculous rule, but for me, it doesn't matter. I still get the players' interviews done.
Yeah. And Tom, we have obviously the NFL draft starting tonight. I'm wondering how much of that, obviously it's not really your world, but I'm sure there's some connectivity. Obviously people talk to you talk about Gruden and all these people. How much of that do you get involved with in terms of just how much attention do you pay to it?
I'll sit around and I'll tweet out, because almost all these guys I interviewed in high school, except the number one guy, Cam Ward. I never heard of him. And I guess he went to Incarnate in San Antonio, and then he grew. He was chubby then. And there's always a couple players like that really weren't big names in high school. No one even knew about. He had to go to 3 different colleges to really make a name for himself. But for the most part, like Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders, I've seen these guys in high school. Matter of fact, I saw Deion Sanders in high school, and so I've stayed in touch with Deion, and he had let me know about his 2 sons when they were coming out. So I do see these guys, and I'll tweet about them. Every now and then there's a front office guy from the NFL call me and ask me about what I thought of the character of the ball player, of different players. I get that every now and then, more so than what I thought of them as players in high school, because now they're 3, 4, and 5 years away from when I saw them. So I still get that, and I still watch the ball players. I don't really watch many NFL games, but I do watch a lot of the college games and see how the ball players are doing. Arch Manning was my National Player of the Year, and Peyton and Eli were friends of mine, guys that I interviewed back when they were in high school also. So a lot of the guys I've seen now, and I just want to see how they're doing and how they've really – and a lot of times – your 5-star ball players make it, but I always said that 50% of the 5-star players make it. The other 50% don't make it because of injuries, academics, problems off the field. You don't know about their personality. So it's really a crapshoot sometimes when you're talking about the great players.
Tom, we appreciate.
Well, wait a minute. Before we leave, we got to talk. We have a
mileage. We
have a movie star on our hands also. One of the great sports shows of all time was the
Blind Side.
The Blind Side, the Michael Orr story, and we have a person on this podcast that was a cameo.
Well, we know that. Yeah, that's
And tell us, Tom, about your experience on.
Came across very well on that. Yeah,
on Blind Side and the Michael Orr. I mean, was he that good a ball player when you saw him, or?
Yeah, he was. I was one of the 5 main characters in the book when the book came out because I discovered him. And Hugh Freeze, the head coach at Auburn, was the high school coach who had sent me back then. It was my last year at ESPN before I switched to CBS. And he used to have a car with my head on it, move me along the internet wherever I was driving to. He saw I was coming in a few weeks to Memphis, and he sent me some raw footage of the kid hadn't played football yet, so him going through the rope drill like Baryshnikov. And he said he's 6'5", 350, running a 4.8. And I said, if a kid's that big, running like that and that athletic, I'm going to name him the #1 tackle in the country. So when I got down to Memphis, I invited the top 10 guys. 9 showed up on time. He came with the Kicker's family, not the Toohey family that's in the book, another rich kid's family. And he was sort of monosyllabic, surly, didn't answer anything. I was there for about an hour. Finally, I said, Mike, I'm going to name you as the #1 tackle in the country tomorrow on ESPN, but I'm not going to invite you to the Army game because I don't like your attitude. And that was it. He just shrugged his shoulders and left. 6 months later, Hugh Freeze called me and go, Tom, Michael's sitting here crying because you didn't name him to the Army game, and the 10 guys after him are in the game. I said, you got to be kidding. The kid acted like he didn't even want to be there. He didn't want to talk. And he goes, I didn't know his story. Then he told me his story. He was living in abandoned homes until the rich families took him in and gave him food and protection and everything else. And so then I told you, if you could teach him how to play center in 1 month, because it's December and the game's in January, we'll put him in the game. And he played center in our game, and he was flawless, even long snapped. He was a phenomenal
long
athlete.
snapped.
Yeah, even long snap. And what's funny was, in the movie, they got him looking like he didn't know what he's doing. He's playing basketball or football. He was a natural athlete, so the movie took a little license there. And just because they wanted to make it look, that Sandra Bullock was teaching him. Yeah. No, he was a great athlete from the word go.
Very interesting. That's a great side story. Yeah.
Well, you got to promise this time, because you do it every year. You promise me when you come to Connecticut, you're going to call me. We'll have lunch or dinner, and I will buy. So don't worry. If you guys want to come along too, I'll buy them too. But,
that'll be great. I look forward to that.
Listen, Tom, it's great to see you, and thank you for what you've done, and we'll see you in Connecticut.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Safe travels. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
Tom. Thank you. I would imagine with that kind of traveling, my goodness. I love to drive too, but it can also be hot. Just coming back from Citi Field yesterday, it was like, oh my God.
I'm jealous.
He's run into a few traffic jams along the way.
Accidents, and but I don't blame him. But very, very interesting.
He's really a good guy, and he really
guy.
means well. Talking to him over the years, you have these where he really cares about these kids. He wants them to do well. He wants not that he's going to put them in the book and they're going to sell the book.
Yeah,
but he cares about these kids. It's neat to see.
Yeah.
Good person, very good person.
Thanks for listening to Hanrattys Huddle. Want to get in touch? Reach out on our Facebook page. We'll see you next time.